Good morning, and welcome to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC, and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you to Talk of the Town for this Wednesday, August 12th. I'm Gary Stevens. In about an hour, we'll have Patty Vandenberg join us with What's New Around Holland. We'll be joined in our 10:30 segment by Ottawa County Sheriff's Lieutenant Designate Eric Westphair, talking about boating and water safety. He is with the department's Marine Unit. We'll have open line following the 10 and 11 o'clock news blocks. But in our first half hour, we normally chat once a month. We did a little bit earlier, a week ago, in fact, but he rejoins us for his regularly scheduled chat. He is the Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Justin Roebuck. He joins us via the Zoom connection. Justin, good morning and welcome back to WHTC.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Gary.
Glad you are with us. And if you have a question for Justin, you'll be happy to take it at 395-1450, 395-1450. We chatted a week ago, Justin, about the August 4th primary election. For the most part, though, we would say it ran very well. Talk about some of the numbers that you can now have as a final numbers now about that election.
Yeah, absolutely. We are literally in the process right now of finalizing our canvass of the election, which is essentially the certification process that happens in the days after the vote comes in. Results on election night are always unofficial because afterwards the Board of County Canvassers literally conducts an audit of all of the election results in every precinct. So they're about ready to sign off on this election this morning. But basically we had about 49,000 absentee ballots were cast. That represents the biggest number of absentee ballots that we have had ever cast in an election in Ottawa County. That also represents 68% of the total vote total, which is also a record in terms of the number of absentee ballots that we've had cast as a percentage. So kind of extraordinary, other than obviously the May special election, which was a little unique because we were under an executive order for a vote by mail kind of a situation. So really kind of a remarkable number. We also had of the record number of folks that applied for an absentee ballot, we had 80% of everyone who applied for a ballot returned their ballot. So that's a great marker as well. And yeah, overall, it was really a smooth election process. We had jurisdictions that worked really hard to process and tabulate all the absentee ballots they received. Obviously, 23,000 people also voted safely in person, and that process went really smoothly. So overall, a really what I would call a big success for the county and more importantly, for our voters.
A simple question, maybe not so simple of an answer. What happens if a ballot was returned on, say, August 5? It got in the mail and came in August 5. It was postmarked before August 4, but it came to the local clerk's office on August 5. Too bad, so sad?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, yes, basically Michigan law states that a ballot has to be physically in hand and received by the local clerk on or before 8 p.m. on election day in order to count. And, that's been state law for a long time now. Obviously, voters in the precincts have until 8 p.m. on election day to vote, and therefore that same cutoff was always been the case for absentee ballots. We have had some litigation recently this year. Essentially, voter groups have been asking for that to be expanded to say, let's count ballots by the postmark. Let's look at a set number of days after the election where we will continue to receive and count ballots. And the Supreme Court of the state of Michigan just last week, I believe, maybe now the week before last, opted not to take up that litigation. And so essentially that ballot deadline stands.
Just want to make sure that Somebody said, well, I put it in the mail last Saturday. You know, it should have been there. It's only, 5 blocks away, but still, rules are rules.
Absolutely. And that's the tough thing. We definitely encourage voters, make a plan for the voting process, whether you're going to do it in person or by absentee. If you're voting by absentee, you really want to, and you're using the mail to get your ballot to the clerk, you really want to make sure that ballot is in the mail at least 7 days. What we say is 7 to 10 days prior to the election. So essentially, that's a really important cutoff time, just to allow the postal system the ability to get that ballot to your clerk. If you're in town locally, feel free to use a drop box. Every one of our 23 local jurisdictions has a drop box, and we're really going to be emphasizing that in November as well.
395-1450. Good morning. You're on the line with Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Justin Roebuck.
Hi, Justin. Two things. I know that if you submit your absentee ballot by mail, you can track it online, I believe. So for people who might not see that their ballot has been received, they can still vote in person, correct? If it got lost in mail, they could still show up and vote if they've not been accounted for yet. Am I correct?
Absolutely. That's a great point. You're absolutely correct. Any voter can track the status of their absentee ballot at michigan.gov/vote. So your ballot will be tracked from the time that you mail the application to say your local clerk's received the app, to say that your local clerk has mailed your ballot, and then obviously we'll track whether or not your local clerk's received your ballot. So that's a really great point. michigan.gov/vote. And then, like you say, if you're running into the instance where you are checking online the day or two before the election and realize that your clerk has not yet received a ballot from you, you always have the opportunity to go in person at the precinct and vote a regular ballot as well. There's a process that you kind of have to go through. You have to sign a document because you obviously are on the list for receiving an absentee ballot. But that's certainly an option that's available to voters. Great point.
Cool. My original question was going to be this is, seeing how most people, I guess you could say majority of the people voted by absentee this time, what is the advice you would give both parties, Democrat and Republican, to change their strategy for messaging? Because if a majority of your voters are going to vote prior to the election, your message might need to be a little different, and you might need to get your info out sooner. So I know we used to just worry about senior citizens or most of the people who would vote absentee, but now it's like regular people, and I'm not a senior yet, and I've signed up to vote for absentee from now on. So what advice would you have to both parties? I'll hang up and listen. So
I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Well, again, that's another great point, because obviously in 2018, we had the passage of Proposal 3 that changed that whole process for us. Prior to this, absentee votes certainly were used extensively by certain communities, but they were a fraction of the total vote. And now we're looking at, in an August primary, 68%, almost 70% of our voters participating that way. That's a huge shift. And the timing is a big shift. So, for example, in November, for the November 3rd election, most voters who've already applied for absentee ballot, which is thousands, over 50,000, will be receiving their ballot the last week of September, or the second to last week of September. So what does that do for a campaign strategy? I think that's a really great question. I mean, I'm not in the business of giving specific campaign advice, but I'll tell you one thing, it is a game changer in terms of how candidates need to interact with voters, because voters are certainly receiving their ballots early. What's also an interesting statistic, and I don't know if I had this if we discussed this last week, Gary, or not, but one of the interesting things that we're finding is that there's a huge number of people returning absentee ballots in the couple of days leading up to the election. And in fact, on election day, we received the biggest total of absentee ballots received by day happened on election day. So there are still a lot of people who are kind of waiting out there, whether that is natural tendency of procrastination, which I myself happen to have. I told my wife the other day, I realized, our absentee ballots have been sitting out here on the dining room table for a week and a half. We probably should get those in. So there is some of that human nature element there too, where you're not going to receive all of the votes that early, but certainly there will be a shift earlier in the cycle because of that many people voting absentee.
If you got a question for Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds Justin Roebuck, he'll take it at 395-1450, 395-1450. I found it a little amusing, I think, more than anything else, when I got my absentee ballot. It says, fill out in black or blue ink. But if you go and vote in person, you have to use a number 2 pencil.
Well, that is also interesting. I actually had a conversation with my neighbor over that, because so the both are kind of an outmoded instruction. So the black or blue ink is specifically because the scanner, the scan devices that used to be in operation across the state were literally like a Scantron device. So if anybody has taken an SAT or that kind of a test, right? We all kind of understand what that looks like. So those Scantron devices, if you were to use a strange color, red in particular is a bad one to use for that kind of a device. Well, all of our devices have been updated. In 2017, we received new equipment. It's digitally scanned. So the color of the ink doesn't matter as much as it did. But those number 2 pencils have always been out for filling out applications to vote. And I literally don't know why. I've been asked that question just recently. I think that's just kind of the way we've always done it. A lot of our local clerks obviously have that.
I just found it,
And
like,
it's kind of odd.
You're right. And of course, I'm one of those that make sure you, in person or now in the absentee, you color in the entire box.
Yes.
It's almost as if it's a coloring exercise. We go with that. But still, no crayons allowed.
Yeah.
To
crayons will definitely gum up the tabulation devices. We don't want that.
Okay. Serious point, though, Justin Roebuck. Sometimes you learn lessons in elections. I have a funny feeling a lesson was learned with your office and Bob Janetsky's office in Allegan County, involving 4 precincts in Holland who didn't have 2 ballot issues on their ballot because the ballots was printed in Ottawa County and not in Allegan, and they didn't have 2 countywide ballot issues that shall we say, an aggrieved elector said, "Where's those things?" Happened to be the county board chairman. Yeah,
right, exactly. I think the one challenge that we have had, and there are a number of communities that have this across the state, where municipalities actually bleed over across county lines and county boundaries. So the challenge has been in the city of Holland, there are 5 precincts that are within Allegan County, but there's about 25,000 citizens over there, in that section of, there's about 5,000 of the 25,000 in Holland live in Allegan County. So because of the fact that they cross county boundaries, and because of the fact that Allegan County and Ottawa County have 2 different systems, we utilize 2 different vendors for our election process. We have historically, actually since 1946, we have housed the whole election system for the entire city of Holland, has been the system that Ottawa County has used. And that follows, I guess you would say, tradition. This is the case in most of the other cities. Lansing and East Lansing are an example. There's a few cities in Southeast Michigan as well that cross over. So generally what happens is the county of largest population actually sets the voting system. And it's really for the benefit of the citizens of Holland, in the sense that if you're going to vote on a city election or really any other election, you kind of want a uniform process and a uniform system throughout the city. And so essentially we are the print vendor for Allegan County, to use those terms. So Allegan County will send us the candidate or proposal information, and then Ottawa County sets that up essentially for that information and for those Allegan County voters to utilize on our system. And so, it's a difficult communication challenge, and we definitely understand that. but some real challenges there for Allegan County as we're trying to kind of work through the process of making sure that we get all the information that we need in order to program an accurate ballot.
Now, in this situation, then, Allegan is printing the ballots for the special 2 issues, or is it your office that's going to do it?
No, Allegan County will be handling that election. The election is entirely within Allegan County, obviously,
Right.
a special election. And our equipment will not be used. The HART system, we have HART InterCivic for our election software and our election, the tabulators that voters see on election day. The company called HART InterCivic, they've been around for about 100 years. They're based in Austin, Texas. And there's about 25% of Michigan voters vote on HART InterCivic. And Allegan County has the Dominion system. So this special election is actually governed in state law and is required to be hand tallied. So our system will not be used, the HART system will not be used for tabulation of any ballots. And Allegan County is obviously conducting that election.
And of course, that means the city of Holland's clerk's going to have to hand count all of that. That's why they get paid the big bucks. Good morning. You're on the line with Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Justin Roebuck.
Good morning. Do you remember reading about a county near Detroit where there were more votes than there were voters in 2016?
Well, so there was a couple of things. In 2016, during the recount process, the city of Detroit had a couple of issues where essentially what happened was the number of ballots cast on their records on election night and so forth did not match the number of ballots that were found in the recount, that were sealed up in the containers and brought to the recount. And the reason for that was that some ballots were left in the tabulators on election night. So in other words, the election workers at the end of the evening, as they close the polls up, one of the primary responsibilities is to maintain the chain of custody of the physical voted ballots. So the election workers remove the ballots from the bin where the voters have placed them, essentially, and then they put them into approved sealed ballot containers. Seal numbers are placed on those containers. They're signed off by both a Republican and a Democrat on election night, and then they're brought to the local clerk's office for storage. So when the recount happened, those ballots were, taken before the recount. They were opened up, and the hand count of ballots did not match what was on the totals tape. So essentially, there were more voters on the totals tape than there were ballots in the container. The reason for that, though, was that the ballots were not removed from the containers in the city of Detroit. So that was one issue that I do remember hearing about, particularly with the recount situation in Southeast Michigan.
So is there any wonder that people wonder about the authenticity of the ballots and why they wonder about, voter fraud, and especially in areas like Detroit, when you have so many ballots being mailed out and such a mega way of having to count them by hand?
Mm-hmm.
Can you understand why people think that, there's something wrong with the way absentee ballots, and especially ballots being mailed out to everyone, is a problem?
I absolutely understand that. I think I understand the concerns that people have. And I think not only are they legitimate concerns, but I think that election administrators across the state and nation, we owe it to our voters, to our folks that, you hire me. I am an elected person, and my responsibility is, one of my jobs is administering the election process for the county. And I owe it to people to explain what it is that we do and how we do it, to explain the security of the process, and also, I think, to advocate for changes that I feel would enhance the security of the process. And I think that elections is something that, I've done it now for about 17 years. I've been in the business at some level of election administration. And it's something that a lot of people just don't think about. I don't think about how, when I go get my car worked on, I actually have no idea what they're doing under there. And I think it's similar in a way, because it's we have a process. It's laid out in statute. That process is designed to protect the integrity of the system. It is designed to have checks and balances. Are there failings in that sometimes? Absolutely. Are there ways we can improve that? Absolutely. But I do think that here in Michigan, we have a system that is secure, and that is set up to catch bad guys when things do present themselves. But I also think it's a great opportunity, because we've had so many questions about our process this year, legitimate questions. We also have a legitimate need for people to get involved. And so what I've said to people who've had questions, sign up. I mean, I would love to have people who are earnestly wanting to know about the process signed up and working and in that volunteer capacity, helping us engage, because there are things that you will bring to the table because you have questions, and there are things that you will learn about the process. So I absolutely think it is legitimate and right for citizens to question this process, but I do believe that we can trust it. We just have to keep working toward accuracy and toward integrity.
Appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Justin, you touched upon it just a moment or so ago, the need for volunteers. We talked about a little bit last week in our conversation. The help wanted sign is out for at the Ottawa County Clerk's office for people to help during elections.
Absolutely. I think this is, again, one of the most interesting election seasons we've had. Obviously, presidential elections are always fascinating and always involved, and a lot of people are always interested. But a presidential election during a pandemic has not happened in a while. And I think one of the challenges we've had as our population of election workers, about 74% of election workers in the state of Michigan are over the age of 60. And I think a lot of folks have stayed with us, and we really, really, value the workers that we've had, because they bring so much to the table: experience, knowledge of the community, willingness and caring to get involved in this civic process. But we need more, and we need folks who are willing to, kind of step up to the plate. It's a long day on election day, but it is a great opportunity to serve. It's a great opportunity to engage in your community, in your neighborhood, really, because our precincts are designed in Michigan and set up in such a way that you're voting in your neighborhood and you're with your neighbors. So it's a really cool opportunity for folks to get engaged. And like I say, to learn more about the process, but also to contribute to the integrity of the process.
Now, how do they register with you, or do they go through the local clerk?
So they can do both. Election workers are actually paid, by the way. They're hired by the local clerk. So we have 23 jurisdictions in Ottawa County. So you can always reach out to your local city or township clerk. We are also kind of coordinating a recruitment effort, because the county trains election workers. So we're coordinating a bit of a recruitment effort for November. And if folks are interested, they can email elections@miottawa.org. elections@miottawa.org. We'll definitely get you signed up and plugged in, and kind of direct folks to the jurisdiction where they are comfortable working.
Justin Roebuck, Ottawa County Clerk, Register of Deeds. As always, we appreciate your time chatting about some of the things going on with your office, and we'll look forward to the November 3rd general election when next we chat next month. Justin, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Good to be with you.
Thank you very much, Justin Roebuck on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.